Welcome to Crime Scene X. Today's video will cover 3 horror stories that happened during Christmas. If you enjoy today's video, then please leave a like, comment down below, and subscribe for more scary content. Now sit back and enjoy today's stories. The holiday season had always been a magical time for our family, a period steeped in tradition and warmth. I'm Emily, and this particular Christmas Eve at age 16 was supposed to be like any other. Our home, nestled on the outskirts of a small, peaceful town, was always the epitome of the holiday spirit. Snow blanketed the ground outside, creating a serene, almost otherworldly landscape of sparkling white. Inside, the house was alive with the spirit of Christmas. Our living room was a cozy haven, with a large Christmas tree standing proudly in the corner, adorned with heirloom ornaments and twinkling lights. The scent of pine mixed with the sweet aroma of cookies baking in the kitchen, a yearly tradition my mom upheld with religious fervor. My dad was in his usual spot, an armchair by the fireplace, his laughter filling the room as he shared stories from his youth. His eyes sparkled with joy, the lines on his face deepening with each smile and chuckle. Mom sat across from him, her hands busy with knitting needles, creating what I guessed was another sweater for Tommy, my 8-year-old brother. He was sprawled on the floor, completely absorbed in a world of toy cars and imaginary adventures. I lounged on the couch, half engaged with the family banter, my fingers dancing over my phone's screen as I exchanged holiday greetings with friends. The soft melodies of Christmas carols played in the background, a soundtrack to our idyllic evening. Suddenly, our world shattered. A deafening crash from the rear of the house jolted us into a state of panic. 3 figures, clad in dark clothing and grotesque masks, burst into the room. The leader, a tall figure brandishing a handgun, barked orders with a menacing tone, his voice muffled behind the mask. My heart raced, every beat echoing in my ears like a drum of impending doom. In a matter of seconds, our festive sanctuary turned into a scene of terror. My dad, ever the protector, stood up, his voice calm yet firm, attempting to reason with the intruders, but his words were met with hostility. The intruders, moving with a practiced efficiency, began binding our hands and feet with the colorful cords of our Christmas lights, transforming symbols of joy into tools of restraint. My mind raced, fear intertwining with desperation. In a moment of clarity, I remembered my phone, subtly inching it out of my pocket. Lying face down, I managed to send a covert SOS to 911, my fingers trembling as I typed out our address and the situation, praying the intruders wouldn't notice my movements. The intruders ransacked our home, their laughter and destructive sounds a stark contrast to the holiday tunes that still played softly. Each crash, each shout, tore further into the fabric of our family's safety. Then, the distant wail of sirens pierced the air. The intruders became agitated, their movements erratic. They argued among themselves, their voices tinged with panic. The gun was pointed in all directions, an ominous threat that kept us in a state of petrified silence. The standoff with the police seemed to stretch for an eternity. Through muffled voices and the occasional glimpse through the windows, I sensed the tension outside. My focus was on Tommy, who lay beside me, tears streaming down his face. I whispered words of comfort to him, trying to mask my own fear. Finally, a sudden eruption of movement and sound signaled the end. Police officers swarmed into the room, their shouts mixing with the cries of the intruders. A gunshot rang out, followed by a heavy silence. The next moments were a blur, officers untying us, assuring us of our safety, leading us away from the chaos. As we stepped outside, the crisp night air felt like a slap of reality. Our home, once a haven of holiday cheer, was now a crime scene bathed in the flashing lights of police cars. We were safe, but the innocence of our family's Christmas was forever lost, a casualty in a night of unforeseen horror. That Christmas Eve was unlike any other. The world outside was quiet, covered in snow, and my bedroom felt different, almost magical in the night. I was 9 years old, too excited to sleep, my mind filled with thoughts of Christmas. The moonlight coming through my window made everything look mysterious and strange. In my room, everything seemed a bit spooky. My dolls, sitting on the shelf, looked like they were watching me. The shadows on the walls moved in weird ways, as if they were alive. Every little noise in the house, every whisper of the wind, made me feel a bit scared, like something was about to happen. Suddenly, there was a noise. The window, which was always closed during winter, started to open slowly, making a creaking sound. A cold breeze came into my room, and I could see my breath in the air. I was really scared now, my heart beating fast. A man appeared outside my window. I could only see parts of his face in the moonlight, but he looked scary, with deep lines on his face and eyes that seemed to shine. He moved smoothly, like he was part of the night. When he came into the room, it felt even colder, as if he was bringing the chill with him. I was too scared to scream or make any noise. When he reached for me, his hands were cold and his grip was strong. He lifted me out of my bed, and I felt like I was being taken away by a shadow. My room, my safe place, seemed so far away now. We went out into the night, leaving my room behind. I felt like I was in a nightmare, really happening. The man, who seemed more like a ghost or a monster, carried me into the darkness of the night, a night that was hiding more scary things than I could imagine. We moved silently through the snow-covered streets, the world around us eerily still as if frozen in time. The snow under our feet made soft crunching sounds, the only noise in the otherwise silent night. The houses we passed were dark, their inhabitants likely lost in dreams of Christmas joy, unaware of the strange and frightening scene unfolding outside. The cold night air bit at my skin, and I shivered, not just from the chill but also from fear. The man's grip on me was firm and unyielding, a constant reminder of my helplessness in this bizarre situation. His pace was steady, unbothered by the deepening snow or the cold that seemed to grow more intense with each step. After what felt like hours, the man stopped in front of a building that looked old and neglected. It stood in stark contrast to the festive decorations that adorned some of the other buildings we had passed. The paint was peeling off the walls, and the windows were grimy, giving the building a forlorn and unwelcoming appearance. He carried me inside, and the change in atmosphere was immediate. The air was stale and musty, filled with the smell of damp and decay. It was as if the building itself was holding its breath, adding to the sense of unease that had settled over me. The hallways were dimly lit, the light bulbs flickering occasionally, casting strange shadows on the walls. The apartment we entered was in disarray. Old newspapers and empty cans were strewn about the floor, and a faint odor of something rotten lingered in the air. The furniture was sparse and looked as if it hadn't been used in a long time. Dust particles floated in the slivers of moonlight that managed to penetrate the dirty windows. The man set me down, his actions deliberate but strange. He moved around the apartment with a familiarity that suggested he lived there, but his attention kept drifting back to me. His gaze was unsettling, making my skin crawl. He didn't speak, and the silence between us was heavy, filled with unasked questions and unspoken fears. I sat there, trying to wrap my mind around what was happening. The reality of the situation was hard to grasp. Kidnapped on Christmas Eve, taken to this strange and grim place by a man who was as much a mystery as the reason behind his actions. Fear kept me rooted to the spot, a fear that was about more than just my surroundings. It was a fear of the unknown, of what this man might do, and of whether I would ever see my home and family again. As the night dragged on, the eerie stillness of the apartment was suffocating. I longed for the safety of my room, for the familiar comfort of my bed, and the soft glow of my nightlight. Instead, I was trapped in this nightmare, the reality of which was more terrifying than any ghost story I had ever heard. The man eventually left the room, disappearing into the shadows of the apartment. His absence brought no relief, only a deeper sense of dread about what might come next. The room felt colder, emptier, as if even the scant warmth he provided had been a barrier against the desolation of the place. I sat there, huddled in a corner, trying to stay warm. My thoughts raced, a jumbled mix of fear, confusion, and a desperate longing for home. The apartment was quiet, the only sound being the occasional creak of the old building settling, each noise making me jump. Time seemed to stretch on endlessly. The darkness outside the window slowly gave way to the pale light of dawn, signaling Christmas morning. This realization brought a fresh wave of sadness and fear. This was supposed to be a day of joy and celebration, not of captivity and terror. Eventually, the man returned. He looked different in the dim light of morning, less menacing but still unnerving. He approached me, and for the first time since he had taken me, he spoke. His voice was rough, almost gruff. But there was a hint of something else in it. Not kindness exactly, but perhaps a lack of malice. He told me he was going to let me go. I didn't understand why, and I didn't ask. Relief flooded through me, so powerful it left me momentarily dazed. He opened the door and gestured for me to leave. I hesitated, half expecting this to be some cruel trick. But the earnestness in his expression convinced me he was telling the truth. I stepped out of the apartment and into the hallway, which was now touched by the soft light of morning. The man followed me to the front of the building, then stopped, as if unwilling or unable to step out into the light. He pointed in the direction of my house and told me to go straight home. The walk back was surreal. The streets were still quiet, but the world felt different in the light of day. I was free, but the night's events hung over me like a dark cloud. When I finally saw my house, a sob of relief escaped me. I ran the rest of the way, bursting through the front door. My parents were frantic with worry. They hugged me tightly, asking a million questions, but I was too overwhelmed to answer. The police were called, and I told them everything I could remember about the man in the apartment. But in the end, they never found him. That Christmas was a blur of police officers, concerned relatives, and quiet moments of reflection. The joy of the holiday was lost, overshadowed by the ordeal I had gone through. It took a long time to feel normal again, to sleep through the night without waking up in fear. As I grew older, I often thought about that night. I wondered why the man had taken me and why he had let me go. I never got any answers, but I came to realize that not all monsters are purely evil. Sometimes they are just people, lost in their own darkness. The experience stayed with me. I was stolen away and then returned, a night that forever changed the way I saw the world. The spirit of December was in full swing, its cheerful chaos echoing through the bustling streets and crowded shops. There I was, engulfed in the last-minute Christmas shopping frenzy, weaving through throngs of eager shoppers. The air was crisp and cold, biting at my cheeks, a stark contrast to the warm, inviting glow emanating from store windows, each a miniature wonderland of holiday delights. Despite the merriment around me, a sense of unease had begun to creep into my consciousness. It started as a whisper, a niggling feeling at the back of my mind, easy to dismiss amidst the sound of Christmas carols and the clamor of cash registers. But as the evening wore on, the feeling grew stronger, turning into a heavy sense of being watched. I first noticed him outside a toy store, his presence incongruous amidst the holiday cheer. He was a solitary figure, standing a bit too still, his gaze fixed in my direction. His eyes were hidden under the shadow of a worn-out hat, but I could feel them on me, cold and unyielding. I told myself it was just a coincidence, the random crossing of paths in a busy city. But as I continued my shopping, weaving in and out of stores, the man's presence became a recurring anomaly. I would catch glimpses of him, always at a distance, always watching. His coat was tattered, hanging off his frame, and he moved with a predatory stealth that set my nerves on edge. Each sighting sent a jolt of fear through me, ratcheting up my anxiety. The streets began to empty as shops closed their doors, their windows darkening one by one. The festive lights that had seemed so inviting now cast long, ominous shadows. My heart pounded in my chest as I quickened my pace, the sound of my footsteps echoing off the buildings. Then, without warning, he was there, right behind me. I could feel his breath, hot and ragged against the back of my neck. Panic surged through me, propelling me forward in a desperate sprint. I heard his footsteps pounding against the pavement, in sync with my racing heart. I darted into an alley, hoping to lose him, but he was relentless. The alley was a dead end, a fact I realized too late. I turned to face him, my back against the cold brick wall. The man loomed over me, his face finally emerging from the shadows. There was madness in his eyes, a terrifying emptiness that chilled me to the bone. He lunged at me, a knife glinting in his hand. I dodged, feeling the whoosh of the blade as it missed me by inches. My mind raced, desperately searching for a way out, a way to survive. The fight for my life had begun, a twisted dance of predator and prey on the cold, hard streets, under the indifferent gaze of Christmas lights. The festive cheer that had filled the air hours ago was now a distant memory, replaced by the stark reality of my perilous situation. Adrenaline coursed through my veins, sharpening my senses as I grappled with the stark reality of the situation. The man's eyes were devoid of reason, reflecting a darkness that no festive light could pierce. The alley, once just a shortcut, now felt like a trap, its walls echoing with the gravity of my predicament. In a desperate bid for survival, I ducked under his next swing, feeling the air shift as the knife sliced through it. My heart raced, each beat a drum of terror. I needed a plan, but panic clouded my thoughts. The festive melodies from nearby streets, once symbols of joy, now sounded like distant, mocking echoes. I glanced around, searching for anything to use as a weapon or a means to escape. The alley was littered with remnants of the day's activities: discarded boxes, a broken bottle, the usual refuse of city life. My eyes fixed on the broken bottle, its jagged edge glinting under the dim light of the alley. As the man advanced again, I lunged for the bottle, my movements driven by instinct. I grasped it firmly, feeling the cold, sharp edge against my palm. The man paused, his crazed eyes briefly registering surprise. It was a fleeting moment, but enough to fuel a spark of hope within me. He attacked again, more viciously this time, the knife arcing down with deadly intent. I sidestepped, narrowly avoiding the blade, and swung the broken bottle with all the force I could muster. It connected with his arm, causing him to howl in pain and drop the knife. The sound of his anguish was a jarring contrast to the silent night. Blood dripped from his arm, dark and ominous on the snow-covered ground. For a moment, we both paused, breathing heavily, assessing each other. I knew this was my chance. I bolted, my legs carrying me with newfound urgency. I could hear him behind me, his footsteps fueled by rage and pain. The end of the alley was in sight, a gateway back to the lit streets, back to safety. I emerged onto the street, gasping for air, my cries for help tearing through the night. People turned, their festive cheer replaced by concern and confusion. I pointed back to the alley, my words tumbling out in a rush of fear and desperation. The police arrived swiftly, their sirens cutting through the night. The man was apprehended, still clutching his wounded arm, his eyes burning with a malevolent fire. As they led him away, his gaze met mine, a silent vow of enmity. I was left standing in the midst of the Christmas crowd, a survivor of a nightmare that had shattered the peace of the holiday season. The festive lights twinkled around me, but their magic was lost, overshadowed by the terror of the night. The aftermath was a blur of police statements, concerned faces, and the comforting embrace of loved ones. The news reported the incident, revealing the man's identity as a felon recently released on parole, his past marred by violence and murder. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already, please like the video, comment what you thought, and subscribe for daily uploads.